On the other side, we shift our focus to a different kind of fear and fakery, one that is playing out in West Asia war and impacting the whole world. And all that everyone is talking about is the mission that was carried out in Iran yesterday by the US forces. While America claims it was one of the most audacious rescue efforts ever to bring back the F-15E officer who was stranded after the fighter jet crashed, the Iranians are offering a different version. Iran Foreign Ministry has stated that the possibility was that a deception operation aimed at stealing enriched uranium could by no means be ruled out. Well, with just about an hour to go for US President's first address since the operation and also the first address since his shockingly abusive rant against Iran, what could you expect? And joining me tonight to explain all of that, well, on the other side is Colonel Douglas Macgregor. Joining me on the news hour tonight is Colonel Douglas Macgregor, geopolitical risk advisor and former senior advisor to the US Secretary of Defense. Thank you very much, Colonel Macgregor, for speaking with me here. First and foremost, President Donald Trump is unlike any president any of us has seen ever before. We know that President Richard Nixon used to abuse and swear, though on private occasions, but here we have public messages which I'm afraid I can't even repeat on national television. How do you interpret these messages and statements from President Trump?
I think we have to keep in mind that this is a much older man than he was the last time I saw him, which was in 2020. So I think he's aged quite a bit. I think he's very frustrated. He's obviously received some advice that didn't turn out to be very good. And when you are in that position, you tend on occasion to become very emotional. So unfortunately, he's emoted too much. That's about the best I can say.
But do you think this is a result of the so-called frustration because he hasn't quite got the results that he would have expected to get out of this military action? And all the memes that Iran has been posting out, you know, starting really from saying that the keys of the Straits of Hormuz are lost, the Nobel Peace Prize is now a Nobel Prize for savagery, all kinds of memes coming out. Do you think this is a first too?
I think he's frustrated because, first of all, he took a lot of advice from the Israelis. The Israelis are the ones that pressed him to essentially wage this war. This war is not being waged for the United States. It's being waged to compel the Iranians to submit to Israeli demands. And those demands, from the very beginning, were largely unacceptable to the Iranians. The Israelis wanted them to halt all enrichment of uranium under any and all circumstances, and then give up that enriched uranium. They wanted them to dismantle a large portion of their ballistic missile arsenal, which was unacceptable because that's been their principal source of defense and deterrence. And then finally wanted them to end any relationships they had in the region, with fellow co-religionists and states that supported them. All of this was unacceptable. So Israel pushed us into a war that we are now supposed to win for them. And that war was designed at first to change the regime. In other words, to topple the government and create the opportunity for the population to rise up and put someone else in there. This was based on Israeli fantasies about Iran, not about the truth, without any understanding whatsoever of Iran and its population. And then secondly, when that failed, we then began this process of destroying what we thought were valuable targets, not just military, but also civilian infrastructure, on the assumption that the Iranians would suddenly give up because we had hit certain targets. Well, that failed miserably. So the final attempt was then to, more recently, try to identify where the enriched uranium was and retrieve it. All of these things have failed. So I think President Trump is very, very upset, and he's looking for a way forward, and there's no easy way forward. And his predisposition, having failed, is, I'm afraid, to reinforce failure and to simply expand the bombing campaign against all of the infrastructure in Iran. And that means petrochemical plants, heating plants, anything connected to energy, potentially even desalination. This, of course, is disastrous because the Iranians have made it very clear that if we do this, they will retaliate by destroying everything in Israel and in the Gulf states that falls into the same category. So the world is, I think, being plunged ultimately into a depression economically. We are sliding into a very deep recession. But he refuses to see these things, and he's determined to wage this war because he thinks by doubling down and increasing the intensity that he's going to somehow or another get a different result. I don't think he will, but that's his position.
So let me ask you, tomorrow 8 p.m., that is Tuesday 8 p.m. American time, is the time President Trump has given a deadline for, and after that it is the power plants, it is all kinds of attacks that he's going to launch in Iran. That's his position. Do you think he will carry out that threat, and where is that going to lead the world?
I think it's leading to a global economic depression because the Iranians are not going to give up control of the Persian Gulf. They recognize the utility of maintaining its control. They've already agreed that anyone who does not support the United States or Israel and is not assisting the United States and Israel in any way will be free to transport oil through the Persian Gulf. The Strait of Hormuz. The problem, though, however, is that this also is providing a great deal of money to Iran. And the Iranians know that when this war ends, they're going to need hundreds of billions of dollars to rebuild their country. So the tolls they're charging are designed to create a fund that will help them rebuild. We are demanding that they give free and unobstructed access. We are not recognizing their interest in the Persian Gulf as legitimate in any way. And so we are looking at several different options and possibilities. One is, once again, to turn to the use of ground forces, perhaps inside the Persian Gulf, to seize key islands on the assumption that this somehow or another will weaken Iran's grip or persuade them to give it up. While at the same time, we're doubling down on the air campaign, destroying more and more infrastructure in Iran. I don't think any of this will work. I don't think this is a good way forward, but I think that's the thinking inside the White House right now.
So let me ask you about this rescue mission that took place over the weekend. There are a lot of theories that are doing the rounds, but what's your assessment of America's ground level involvement, and do you think this rescue mission is exactly what it was, or some conspiracy theories even call it a mission to get their hands on some uranium, because the place where the planes landed is different from the place where the airman was? What do you make of it?
I think two things occurred. First of all, they did shoot down the F-15E. We did have one of the pilots successfully eject. He was retrieved. He happened to be a colonel and was an intelligence officer. So it was very important to us to extricate him from Iran, and we did. He was extracted. At the same time, we decided, I think, as a result of the numbers of assets being committed to his rescue, to launch an operation somewhere in the vicinity of Isfahan that was designed to find and potentially recover enriched uranium in some form. A lot of assets were involved in that, and that was not a small mission. It was a very tightly organized, well-rehearsed special operations mission. But you have to understand something, and Americans don't really understand this. Anything associated with special operations involving Rangers, Delta Force, this sort of business, is very, very fragile. It's very vulnerable. It has to have perfect intelligence. It also, despite tremendous amounts of training, preparation, and equipment, you have to be lucky. because you're going into a foreign country behind your opponent's lines. It's very difficult to do that without being discovered. And I think part of the problem is that thanks to the persistent surveillance that the Iranians enjoy through Chinese and Russian satellites, they were able to find it. Now, they didn't have regular forces in the vicinity, and my understanding is that local forces, in other words, militia, what we in the United States would call citizen soldiers, National Guard, they showed up and inflicted damage. At the same time, they were able to divert air and missile defense forces to deal with the aircraft and other things. It failed. I mean, the bottom line is the operation failed. Was it ever going to be successful? That's hard to say. Again, this is a huge country. This is half the size of India, but it only has 93 million people in it, substantially fewer than you do. But it's a very difficult place to operate unless you have pinpoint accuracy and perfect intelligence. That was not the case. It was a gamble. It didn't pay off. Does that mean it's over as far as Donald Trump is concerned? Absolutely not. I think in the future, the kinds of operations with ground forces will involve paratroopers and Marines in the Gulf to seize key points on islands and key installations. That may turn out differently. We'll see. Again, the big problem for us, and everyone needs to understand this, India needs to understand this for its own national defense, is persistent surveillance from the space. Once you have that, it makes it very difficult for any enemy to approach your country and successfully enter its airspace or its ground space. And that's the situation we currently confront with Iran.
What about the airman number 2? Was he rescued, and how difficult was that operation? And is America right in celebrating, because there are conflicting reports coming out of Iran?
Well, I think we're always grateful that we can extract any American. This man seems to have had a broken ankle. I don't know all the details, and we have to be somewhat suspicious of what is published in the open press. We simply need to be aware that, yes, he was extracted. He's alive, he's well, he's healthy, he'll recover quickly. He was a very important person beyond just being a pilot. And, you know, you always want to reassure your pilots that if they're shot down, you're going to do everything you can to get them out, because if you can't do that, the pilots aren't going to fly these dangerous missions inside the enemy's airspace. So we had to get him out for that reason. But at the same time, he was a very knowledgeable intelligence officer. So we're very happy that he was extracted. Beyond that, I don't want to say very much because I don't know the facts, and I don't think we will know the facts for some time.
So Iran has used its leverage in this conflict right up until now through the Straits of Hormuz, and that has been the undoing of America. But as things stand today on strategic terms, who has the upper hand at this point, according to you?
Well, clearly, Iran has the strategic initiative. It has the upper hand. The point I want to make to you, though, is that this harms us because you have a global oil market and you have the 47 different products that petroleum helps to produce. These things include plastics and, most important, fertilizer, food, feedstock. All of these things are having an especially negative impact all over the world, particularly in the global south and now in Europe. We will be harmed, and I think we will slide into a very deep recession. But my principal concern, I think the concern that the global south should have, is that they could end up in a serious depression. This is not a minor matter. President Trump is blowing up the world. He's blowing up the global economy. This is a catastrophe. It's why I have urged all the countries in the global south, especially India, which is one of the largest. It's a great power with a very well-known leader that has good relations with everybody, to get involved. You know, India didn't want to start this war, but now this war is going right into Indian homes and kitchens. People are going to be in very difficult straits. You're talking about the inability to grow food, the inability to provide sustenance for your population. This goes well beyond oil and refining.
But can Trump be stopped?
I think he can, but it's going to take the efforts of many leaders across the global south, including China, and I would argue Russia. All of them need to get together and present a united front to President Trump. Said, listen, we will not tolerate this anymore. If you continue to do this, we are going to be dragged into this war that we never wanted. And that's something else that nobody seems to understand. The Chinese will only wait so long. The Russians are not going to allow Iran to be destroyed. They will inevitably be dragged in. We should not underestimate the potential impact of Turkish military power. The Turks are also equally concerned about the instability in the region, about the potential for refugees, for the destruction across the Middle East. Egypt is in that position as well, and Egypt is the largest power, largest Muslim Arab power in the region. All of these countries have got to cooperate. They've all got to get together. They've got to present a united front. And I think if they do that, the economic pressure here at home, combined with their demand, will in fact cause President Trump to end the campaign and withdraw. Because the situation here is not getting better. We're looking at a 40 to 50% drop in the stock market probably over the next 2-3 weeks. We're very close to this big recession. Our financial system is in serious trouble. We have a huge national sovereign debt. You have the same situation in Japan. Japan, Korea are equally vulnerable in this connection. They too have to be part of this larger front that demands an end to this conflict. But we're not going, I don't think we, under President Trump, will ever honor any of the demands that the Iranians are making. They want to be compensated for the damage we've done. I certainly understand that. I was opposed to this from the beginning, but I don't see that happening.
Well, yes, tough call at the moment, and things are getting rather hot at home in the United States for President Trump. Bernie Sanders has called him an unhinged madman. Midterm elections. Is Trump really going to, risk a further escalation tomorrow? Once again, I come back to that question.
Yes, I just don't see any evidence that he would not. His opportunity came last week. He could have changed course very easily. He could have said that I've reviewed the results thus far. I think we have done as much as we can do, number one. Number two, I think on humanitarian grounds, we must end this conflict because this is having a very negative impact on our friends. I mean, the last time I looked, India was viewed as a friendly power. Japan is a friendly power. Korea is a friendly power. We're harming our friends. That makes no sense. Look at the damage we're doing in Europe. They're paying $11 for a gallon of gas in Germany. This is going to destroy what's left of the German scientific industrial base.
But is there nobody in America who can reason this out with Trump? And do you expect the whole world to get together to try and have a conversation with a man whose latest, Truth Social posts are shocking, to say the least?
Oh, they're ridiculous. And someone ought to take the phone away from him and make him sleep at night. But no one's been willing to do that. That's another problem. But I would say at this point, Prime Minister Modi, certainly President Xi, President Putin, I would argue also the Prime Minister of Japan, the President of Korea. I would go to Europe and I would add to this particular collection Prime Minister or Chancellor Merz and potentially other European leaders. And if they put together a plan and also with a plan, a statement that says, we want an end to this war. This is why. It's destroying the global economy. It's destroying supply chains. It's destroying the potential for us to have adequate energy in the future. If Trump does what he says he's going to do Tuesday, and I think he will, you're looking at irreplaceable assets in the Gulf. We will not rebuild these petrochemical plants and energy sources for years. What do you do in the meantime? Do you sit there in the dark Do you sit there without the ability to heat your countries, to feed your countries, to grow food? Of course not. So I think at the end of that particular proposal to end this, there has to be a statement in there that says you're threatening the world with something it cannot tolerate. And if this is not halted, a larger war is eminently possible. And I think this has to be made very, very clear, because if the Israelis think that they can continue with impunity and there will be no consequences for them, nothing will change. But if they come to the realization that they could end up at war with more than just Iran, with many other states that have so much at stake that they can no longer sit on the sidelines, I think that too will have an impact.
Well, wake-up call, I think, to the rest of the world to sit up and probably get together and do something about it. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, thank you very much for joining me. We're looking at a bleak future unless, yes, we do something about it. On a hope and a prayer, hoping better sense prevails. Thank you very much, Colonel, for joining me on the News Hour tonight. With that, it's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen.